Hello and thank you for watching. I'm Ashley Van Dyke with Advantage Software, and on today's video, Macro Managed, Stitch Last Word Real Time, I'm going to show you how easy it is to implement the Stitch Last Word Real Time macro. The Stitch Last Word Real Time macro doesn't require the use of special dictionaries or modes, and so it's incredibly easy to implement. Additionally, it can save you a large number of strokes. If you find that you have to stitch a word that does exist in your dictionary, instead of fingerspelling the word, you can simply write the word and use the Stitch Last Word macro to stitch it. Before you can start using the Stitch Last Word macro, you do need to assign it to a dictionary entry. Since this macro name ends in RT, that means it's intended to be used during real time, rather than from your keyboard during editing. You can find your macro settings under Settings, Edit, Macros, and Stitch Last Word already exists in the macro list. You can go down to the S's in the macro list and find Stitch Last Word. Note that there is also a Stitch Previous Word. This macro works a little bit differently, and we'll cover that in another video. Select Stitch Last Word -RT and click Edit. Next, to assign a dictionary entry to this macro, you're going to click Dictionary Entry. In the Steno Emulator window, you're going to enter the steno that you wish to use to execute this macro. Or if you're a voice user, you'll simply type in the voice steno that you want to use. I'm going to use Stitch Stitch as my steno, and I'll press OK. Next, I'm taken to a global style window, and this window indicates that my steno for Stitch Stitch is going to enter the dictionary as macro Stitch Last Word RT, which means that when I write these two strokes, Eclipse will execute the Stitch Last Word macro. And this entry is going in my main dictionary. You always want macros to go to your main dictionary. I'll press OK, and OK, and OK. And before exiting my user settings, I want to take a look at my Stitch settings. Since this macro does execute using the built-in Stitch settings, you can tell what results you'll get based on your Stitch settings in the Edit tab here. So currently when I stitch a word, it will insert hyphens between each letter and capitalize each letter. You also have the option for lowercase stitching, or stitching that will not impact the case at all. It will use the existing case. So I'll let mine remain on the capitalized stitching, and I'll press OK. Now that I know that my stitch settings are correct, and I've assigned the macro to a dictionary entry, which I can verify by opening my dictionary, and after sorting my dictionary by created, I see that this entry for Stitch Stitch equals macro Stitch Last Word RT is in my dictionary. So I'm ready to get started. I'm going to start a real-time file. And I'm going to write and show you how the stitch macro works. First, I'll write my statements. And so here, instead of fingerspelling my name, what I'm going to do is write my stroke for my name, and then use my macro Stitch Stitch to stitch that word instead. So I'm going to write my name, and now I'm going to write Stitch Stitch. And you see that immediately the macro executed, and my name has been stitched and capitalized as specified in the Edit tab of my user settings. And again, all I have to do is write any word and then follow it with my Stitch Stitch macro. And the word is stitched for me. And you see that in my note bar, I have my regular strokes appearing in purple, my deleted strokes appearing in red, and my macro strokes appearing in blue. Whenever you execute a macro stroke, it will show up as your specified macro color in the note bar. And the note bar colors can be specified under Settings, Display, and Color Selections. If I click the drop down for color selections and scroll down, you see that there are three options here: steno in the tracking window, deleted steno in the tracking window, and steno macros in the tracking window. If I choose steno macros in the tracking window, I can select foreground and change these to a different color. And you see that immediately the steno in my note bar has changed color. I can also select background and choose to highlight these in a different color as well. And you see that all macros in my note bar now have the highlighted color. And as soon as I begin writing again, my regular text will get the regular white background color. The stitch last word macro is easy to implement, and part of its ease of use is that it will always apply to the last word in your document. So if I have another word in my document here, but my cursor is further up in the document, I can still hit my stitch macro, and it will still stitch what because it was the last word in the document, and the macro that we're using is stitch last word. And so whatever the last word in the document is, that is the word that will be stitched. And so again, if I write my name, I can place my cursor at the very beginning of my document, write stitch, stitch, and the macro applies to the last word in the document, regardless of my cursor location, or whether or not that word is even visible on my screen. The stitch last word macro is one of the easiest macros to implement, and if you're new to macros, I recommend that you give it a try because it is a simple stroke saving macro that is incredibly easy to implement. Rather than having to fingerspell ASHLI, I was instead able to write my short stroke for my own name and simply hit one extra stroke to stitch that entire word as I wanted. I hope that you'll give the stitch last word macro a try if you're new to macros. It's a great one to get your feet wet with. If you've been intimidated by trying macros in the past, macros like the stitch last word macro are easy to implement, and I'd recommend that these are the kinds of macros that you start with. And just as a reminder, in order to assign a steno stroke to a macro, all you have to do is go to your user settings, the Edit tab, Macros, find the macro that you want to use, hit Edit, and then select Dictionary Entry. In this window, you'll be able to specify or even change the steno that's associated with each macro. If you don't want to wait for more videos in this series to come out, you can go up to Support, Eclipse Documentation, and there are 2 PDFs available built into Eclipse that outline how to use many of the common real-time editing macros, and they also suggest steno that you might use. And again, if you're a voice steno, you can just specify voice steno to use instead. Most macros that go through and edit the document in this manner are accessible to both voice and steno users. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it'll inspire you to give some of the simple macros a try. You can expect more videos in this series coming up. As a reminder, Advantage Software offers anytime support 24/7. Tech support can be reached anytime, including weekends, at 772-288-3266. Email support is also available at support@eclipsecat.com. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.